Hey everyone, it's Wednesday. Matt, you've reached a council member milestone. Today was your first 2-day meeting. You are fresh off of finishing, right?
Yeah, we just wrapped up on this is Wednesday. And so, yeah, yesterday we went, I think overall, I was in meetings almost 15 hours yesterday. We went to midnight and then we resumed this morning. A lot of topics. So we
Yeah,
should dive in while it's still fresh in my mind.
yeah, definitely. All right, so the first one was San José Clean Energy. We didn't preview it, but definitely an interesting report. So I'll let you take that one on.
Yeah, it's concerning, frankly. So the city agreed. We voted, I think, somewhat reluctantly, but realizing that we had to. We voted to allow the city to issue another, well, I shouldn't say another, an initial $70 million in commercial paper. So basically, to borrow money to fill a gap in the kind of operating expenses of the clean energy program. So basically, what's happening here is that the revenue that we're receiving from the rates that we all are paying, all residents and businesses, or most residents and businesses in San Jose are paying into that system, are not covering our costs. And the biggest factor there, and I've mentioned this before, it's kind of a technical concept, but there's this thing called the PCIA, which is, and there's some other factors, but this has really over time been the biggest challenge for San Jose Clean Energy. And I would say it actually calls into question if the entire model is going to work. And I certainly hope that it does. The promise of San Jose Clean Energy was that we could deliver a cleaner energy mix at a lower cost. But that's really being undermined by this charge, the PCIA, which is a state requirement that these local entities like San Jose Clean Energy pay a fee, a quite expensive fee, to PG&E to basically cover the legacy costs of infrastructure and old contracts that PG&E signed prior to the creation of all of these local energy, community choice aggregators, they're called. So that's basically the issue. So this is going to fundamentally be a regulatory issue. This is going to ultimately come down to what the state legislature and the CPUC decides to do. Are they going to give these local entities enough breathing room to be financially solvent or not? And we're going to loan ourselves some money to get through the next couple of years and see how it plays out, because it would be far more disruptive. Now that we're in this business, it would be far worse for us to miss payments and risk the entire city's credit rating. So there's some bigger kind of issues at play here. But anyway, that's kind of it. I mean, I'm concerned. I'm concerned that we're not able to meet our obligations to residents as taxpayers and ratepayers. And we're going to see how this plays out, but I am not going to support continuing to borrow money to backstop a program if it can't be financially sustainable kind of on its own. So that's going to be an ongoing conversation. We're going to revisit in the fall.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing what they come back with. Speaking of coming back with things, public safety, the Reimagining Community Safety Group.
Yeah.
I'll let you
Another
know.
big topic.
Yeah, like last night was not light at all.
No, a lot of important issues. So yeah, we started a Reimagining Community Safety task force back, or advisory group, I should say, after the George Floyd shooting. And the group has had some challenges. After the third meeting, members of the group walked away from the group because they felt that certain issues were not on the table, namely police practices. And so that's really been, I think, at the heart of the concern, is that the community members who are participating want to be able to study and make recommendations on everything they believe is part of the purview of community safety. I think staff was going off of City Council's initial recommendation, which was to focus on the alternatives to policing. So anything from mental health specialists to after school programs to job, getting people connected with jobs. I mean, a whole range of things that are non-police related. Basically, I think we've all come back to the table. We voted to move forward with reconstituting this advisory group adding new members and expanding the scope or the purview of what they can talk about. So I would expect that this group is going to, over the next year, talk about a wide range of topics, including policing practices in our city. And we'll make recommendations that will include how our police department does its job, which is obviously a fraught, it's a controversial topic. There's going to be a lot of emotion around that. But I also think fundamentally people, the community ought to be able to have a robust conversation about all relevant issues there. And so, yeah, we're going to move forward, but that's kind of where that work stands. And I think, unfortunately, it's a slow process. It's going to probably be another year before, at least 6 months before we have substantive reforms that we can act on.
Yeah, okay, sliding into yet another thing that's kind of a...
And Liz, I'm sorry, I said before we can act on, I should be clear, council's doing other things. I serve on the public safety committee. There's a lot of other stuff that we're working on, but this community-driven process is going to take longer, I think is more the point I wanted to make.
Okay, for sure. On the subject of things we have inherited from 2020, the city looked today at both the eviction and the rate increase moratoria. So tell us about those.
Yeah, so these are a couple of moratoria. Moratoria means we're not doing something, we're stopping something legally here. We, in the wake of COVID, put a block on rent increases and on evictions, and we are starting to move past those, but slowly. So the rent increase moratorium will sunset at the end of this month, and that's something we voted to bring to an end. The eviction moratorium is going to be extended at least until August 31st, though I suspect longer. And really the rationale, and I do feel for our landlords, and especially our small landlords who also have a lot of uncertainty. Obviously, I feel for our renters and our tenants who have lost income and are scared of losing their housing. That's obviously been the biggest concern here that we've all had, which is why the moratorium has been in place for so long. I also feel for the small landlord who maybe has one rental property, maybe it's funding their retirement or some other need that they have, and they haven't had any certainty about getting paid now for well over a year or year and a half at this point, and are frustrated. And so the solution here is that there are rental assistance funds that are working their way through the system from both the federal and state government. We're deploying them locally. The solution is to make landlords as close to whole as possible and then allow them to forgive any outstanding debt. For tenants, there's a framework for this. I won't get into all the details. The problem is the money's getting deployed too slowly. And my understanding is more of that has been on the state level than on the local level, but there are a lot of requirements that make it a slow process with a lot of verification. And, it's this trade-off. We don't want fraud, but we also want to deploy the money quickly, and it's a lot of money. We are scaling up, the county's scaling up, we're hiring more people. My emphasis yesterday was on how do we do it faster, and let's get reporting to council at least monthly on the progress of the program, because we've only deployed a fraction of the available funds. And until we deploy those funds, I think the entire council, myself included, is going to be reticent to roll back or to end the eviction moratorium. We certainly don't want to see an increase in homelessness, for example. So anyhow, so that's kind of where we are on both of those, but definitely important topics, and at least the eviction moratorium will be coming back for discussion in August. Yeah.
And the biggest headline on, honestly, any one of these three things could have been a whole week's worth of news, but San Jose Flea Market, we're still not quite at the end of this, right? This is what kind of pushed you guys into today.
Yeah, so this, right, exactly. Yeah, went quite a few hours last night and then a couple more this morning. So the very short history is that in 2007, the owners of the land that the flea market operates on were entitled, they got an entitlement, so they got a legal right from the city to build housing, and maybe I haven't actually looked closely at that plan from 2007, but it was pretty low density housing, and maybe also jobs, actually. That's the city then asked them in 2016, given that BART was coming to Berryessa. BART has now opened. It is the end of the line currently, and it's the only station within the city limits. the city asked the landowner to come back and go through the entitlement process again, submitting an application for a rezoning that would allow for greater heights and greater density and more housing and jobs near this incredible asset, which is this, $1 billion plus BART station that can move a lot of people very efficiently. Of course, the biggest cost, or one of the biggest costs and challenges in all of this, is that we've got a beloved flea market that's been there for 50 years. That's an attraction that draws 4 million people a year to San Jose. That is provides a livelihood for 450 vendors and their families, not to mention other kind of ancillary businesses. It's an incubator for small businesses. It's a path to, making it economically for a lot of lower income residents for whom this is their livelihood. And so, unfortunately, the plan in 2007 and even the council direction in 2016, from what I can tell, did not really make much provision for the vendors. And I think now, fortunately, we have a council that is much more mindful of the risks of displacement and the kind of human cost entailed, and is trying to mitigate that. Now, again, just in the spirit of kind of being efficient here, I think to summarize where we are and kind of where I stand on this, the council member whose district this is in, Councilmember Cohen, David Cohen, has worked incredibly hard, as have some other council members and the mayor, to try to work with both the vendors and the owner, the property owner, to come to some kind of compromise. And I believe, and this is, we didn't all agree today, and that's okay. I believe that the framework that they've put in place and the compromise they've put in place is a great step forward. It gives us a path, and I would like to see us get on that path. So I would have been able to vote in favor of where they have landed after months of discussion and negotiation. What ended up happening this morning is that 6 of my colleagues voted to give us 1 more week. And that's also okay. I didn't feel strongly against doing that. I could see that there were 6 votes, so I did not vote to extend. But again, I didn't feel super strongly either way. The reason I didn't feel that extending was all that helpful was that we've had months of negotiation. Couple of parties involved in this at the center of it have basically said they're done, and that the negotiation in this current format is not going to progress any farther. And let me tell you what's in the deal that I hope that we pass next week. The owners of the property have agreed to carve out 5 acres of the development right next to the BART station, which would be a bit of a plaza. They've enlarged it and said that they will dedicate it to a public market that should be able to provide space for a large portion of the vendors, probably not all 450. The current flea market's 100 acres, so we'd have to shrink it down to 5 acres. So but maybe a third, maybe half, we don't know yet. We need to figure out what that public market would look like, how we'd finance it and operate it. They have also made a guarantee that effectively gives the current vendors, the full 450 at the current site, 3 years of stability, 3 years of not being displaced. So that's a lot of time to find other locations, to make plans, to figure out a transition. They have also committed $2.5 million in cash to a fund to assist the vendors. Now, yes, if you break that down by 450, it's like $5,500 or $6,000. It's not a huge sum of money for them individually, but if you have 3 years to plan, the potential to be in a new market in 3 years, and $5,000 or $6,000 worth of cash to play with, I think that's quite a bit of movement from the landowners. That's all voluntary. There's nothing that mandates that they have to do that. And they do still have this entitlement from 2007 that allows them to build on the old low density plan, which offers nothing to the vendors. So I'm pretty happy with the work that's been done to get us to this place. The question here is just, is there any more negotiation that's going to yield anything else in the next 6 days? And we'll find out next Tuesday, and we'll see. I mean, I wish them well. I wish the vendors all the best. I think we can and should do more. And I supported the push by Councilmember Carrasco to try to find more funding for the vendors. I just think the key distinction here is, I don't think we're going to get more from the vendors from the landowner. I think it's going to have to come from the city and some of our federal fiscal stimulus funds and other sources, maybe even philanthropic partners. I don't think the additional benefits we're going to get for the vendors are going to come from the property owner. I think they've made what is effectively their best last final offer. So that's kind of where we're at. We'll see in a week if there's any more movement. And if there isn't, I hope we'll move forward, because the current plan is actually a really good compromise and gives us a path to doing a lot more for those vendors. The good news is, if this does go forward, we'll have a true urban village with a lot of housing, a lot of jobs, a lot of affordable housing right next to a BART station, which is how we want to do development going forward in our city. So I'll pause there. Is there anything you think I missed on that one?
Yeah, no, I think you hit everything. And yeah, we'll find out next week. And next week is the last council meeting of June. And then we're going to be going into recess for July. So you basically got to finish next week one way or another.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like we may have a special hearing just to do the second hearing on that land use decision around Berryessa in July. So we might have one more small public meeting, but yeah, we'll keep you all posted.
All right. Well, I know you've had a long day and night and morning, so I'll let you get to the rest of your day. And thanks so much for, in spite of that marathon, filling everyone in, Matt.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Liz. Appreciate the time. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.